The sterile scent of disinfectant hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the palpable anxiety emanating from the young girl seated across from me. Alara, a wisp of a girl with haunted eyes and bones that threatened to pierce her papery skin, was my newest client, and her case was already proving to be more complex than I had anticipated. "I'm so fat," she mumbled, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioner. Her fingers, thin and brittle as twigs, dug into the flesh at the back of her arm. It was almost translucent. The skin stretched taut over bone, the faint blue tracery of veins visible beneath the surface. I could practically feel the chill emanating from her, as if her body were struggling to hold on to its warmth. I suppressed a sigh, a familiar wave of helplessness washing over me. 4 months of therapy, and we were still stuck in this agonizing loop. I'd exhausted my arsenal of evidence-based techniques, explored every cognitive avenue, yet Alara remained trapped in the clutches of her eating disorder. A gnawing sense of failure settled in my stomach. Was I simply not skilled enough? Or was there something more insidious at play, something beyond the realm of conventional therapy? I'd considered referring her to someone else, the guilt of accepting her money while making such little progress a constant weight on my conscience. But Alara was insistent, clinging to our sessions like a lifeline in a stormy sea. Perhaps it was her desperation or the unsettling flicker of fear in her eyes that kept me from letting go. "It must be excruciating," I said, my voice gentle, "to see yourself in the mirror and have such harsh thoughts." I avoided the well-trodden path of challenging her distorted perceptions. We'd been there countless times, exhausting every cognitive technique, only to be met with the same stubborn resistance. A shadow fell across her face, her lips twisting into a grimace that spoke volumes of her internal anguish. I was running out of ideas, the familiar sting of inadequacy creeping in. Maybe an ultimatum was necessary. If her family continued to refuse to participate, I'd have to terminate our sessions. Working with just Alara felt like navigating a labyrinth in the dark. I couldn't understand her parents or her older sister. They declared their love and concern, yet remained conspicuously absent from her treatment, their promises to attend sessions as empty as the calories Alara denied herself. I'd only seen them twice, fleeting encounters when they dropped her off or picked her up. Each time, I'd cornered them, ignoring their protests about tight schedules, emphasizing the critical role of family involvement in eating disorder recovery. They'd offered empty promises, nodding politely while their eyes darted towards the exit, their minds clearly preoccupied with other matters. I'd never even met her older sister, only seen the modeling photos Alara used as a benchmark for good enough. A stark reminder of the unattainable standards that haunted her. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken anxieties and the weight of Alara's unseen torment. Then, a thought. An art session. It wasn't the gold standard for anorexia treatment, but the gold standard had failed. Alara loved to draw, especially with charcoal, her fingers finding solace in the smudged lines and dark shades. Perhaps this different approach could unlock something within her, a way to express the pain that words couldn't capture. "Let's draw today," I said, hoping the change in approach might spark something. "Draw yourself how you see yourself, and then draw me. I'll draw how I see you, and how I see myself too." I was deviating from the script, venturing into uncharted territory, but perhaps, through this shared visual dialogue, I could help her bridge the chasm between her self-perception and reality. My own drawing skills were rudimentary, a product of hurried sketches in the margins of textbooks during long lectures. But I persevered, my pencil scratching awkwardly across the paper, attempting to capture the essence of the girl before me. Alara, however, was gifted. Her charcoal sketch of me, with its deft strokes and nuanced shading, captured my essence with startling accuracy. Her self-portrait, though, was a portrait of a stranger, The girl in the drawing wasn't simply larger than Alara. She was someone else entirely. Her eyes were slightly wider, the cheekbones more pronounced, the lips fuller. Even the expression was different, imbued with a sadness and vulnerability that I hadn't yet seen in Alara. "You've drawn in curly hair?" I pointed out gently, tracing the lines of the portrait with my finger. "I know I have straight hair," she replied, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "But the face I see in the mirror, it has curly hair." A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't simply body dysmorphia, a distorted perception of one's own body. This was something else. A disconnection, a dissonance between her physical self and the reflection staring back at her from the looking glass. It was as if her own image had been hijacked, replaced by an imposter. I studied her drawing more closely, my gaze lingering on the subtle differences that transformed the portrait into a stranger. The eyes were slightly wider, the cheekbones more pronounced, the lips fuller. Even the expression was different, imbued with a sadness and vulnerability that I hadn't yet seen in Alara. Who was this girl, this phantom inhabiting Alara's reflection? And what did her presence signify? I stared at the drawing, my mind reeling. Who was this girl who haunted Alara's reflection, this specter with curly hair and eyes filled with a sorrow I couldn't fathom? Was she a figment of Alara's imagination, a manifestation of her distorted self-image? Or was there something more sinister at play, something that defied the boundaries of logic and reason? My professional training urged me to seek a rational explanation, to explore the psychological roots of Alara's delusion. But a primal fear, a deep-seated intuition, whispered that this was something beyond the realm of textbook diagnoses. "What color are your eyes?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The eyes you see in the mirror." "Hazel," she replied, her gaze fixed on the drawing. "Do you have hazel eyes?" I pressed, my heart pounding. She shrugged, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "I didn't, but now I do." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't simply a matter of distorted perception. It was as if her reflection had taken on a life of its own, morphing into someone else entirely. "How do you look in pictures?" I asked, a new line of inquiry forming in my mind. "I haven't taken a picture in almost 3 years," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Since my issues began." "Not even one?" "No, this feeling of fear and disgust takes over when I try to be in a picture." She seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her invisible burden. A sudden idea sparked in my mind, a desperate gamble to break through the illusion. "Let's take one," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Let's prove to yourself how you really look." I prayed she wouldn't see this other self in the photograph too. The thought of this phantom presence extending beyond the mirror into the tangible world filled me with a dread I couldn't shake off. Her eyes widened in alarm, the fear palpable. She seemed about to refuse, but then, with a flicker of defiance, she nodded. "It's about time," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her fists were clenched, her lips bloodless, her entire body trembling with a mixture of apprehension and a desperate hope for change. Before she could change her mind, I whipped out my phone and snapped a picture. A guttural cry tore from her throat, a sound of pure terror that echoed through the room. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. She was shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I'm fine. There was this shock of..." She shook her head, forcing a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. It just felt painful for a second. My heart hammered in my chest. I hadn't expected such a visceral reaction. "There, see how you look for real?" I showed her the photo, my voice trembling slightly. She flinched and squeezed her eyes shut as if the image itself caused her physical pain. "Hey, Alara, it's okay." I tried to soothe her, my own anxiety mounting. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes still tightly closed. "Every time someone wants to show me a photo, I feel this terror. It's like I physically can't look. I'm sorry, that's terrible, But I'm here, Alara. You're in control. You can do this. She shook her head frantically, her body racked with sobs. You can. Really, we can stay here as long as you need, when you're ready. Before I could finish, Alara's eyes flew open, wide with shock and disbelief. Her eyebrows shot up, her jaw slack. No way, she gasped. I look so thin. Relief washed over me, a wave of cautious optimism. Finally, she saw it. She scurried to the mirror, her movements frantic. But here, I look, this isn't me, she said, pointing a trembling finger at her reflection. Excitement coursed through me, tempered with a lingering unease. Most clients with eating disorders saw the same distorted image in the mirror, in reality, and in photographs. The fact that Alara didn't see her perceived flaws in the photo could be a significant breakthrough. But the discrepancy between her reflection and reality remained a disturbing mystery. Look, I said, turning towards her reflection while holding up the phone. This is how you really look. Your reflection should reflect that. My voice trailed off, my throat constricting with a sudden fear. I saw her then. The girl Alara must have been seeing all these months. Taller, fuller figured, with a mark on her cheek, curly hair, and hazel eyes that burned with a fury that seemed to reach out from the mirror and grip my heart. The rage emanating from her felt palpable, like a physical blow. I forced myself to look away, my gaze falling on Alara, who seemed puzzled by the discrepancy between the photo and her reflection. I risked another glance at the mirror. The enraged face was still there, unwavering, its malevolent gaze fixed on me. I closed my eyes, my breath shallow and rapid. The air in the room crackled with an unseen energy, the temperature plummeting as a wave of dread washed over me. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck prickling, a primal fear gripping me. This was no ordinary therapy session. We had crossed over into something unknown, something terrifying. When I opened my eyes, Alara's face was ashen, her lips trembling. Why does it look like that? She whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the reflection. She looks so angry. She's not moving as I am, not looking as I. She swallowed hard, taking a step back. Alara saw it too. I wasn't hallucinating. I stole another glance at the mirror. The girl hadn't moved, her enraged gaze still fixed on me. Alara, I asked, surprising myself with my quick acceptance of the supernatural. When you look down at your own body, not through the mirror, do you see that same girl? I needed to know if we could escape this room, if the apparition was confined to the mirror. She nodded, my hopes plummeting. She looked down and pinched her waist, her fingers digging into the already too thin flesh. I see the fat, she said, her voice filled with self-loathing. The girl in the mirror scowled. Alara and I both jumped back, a synchronized dance of fear. The girl remained, leaning forward, predatory, as if eager to pounce from the confines of the mirror. I grabbed Alara's shoulders, my voice urgent. Alara, we have a problem, and I don't think it's anorexia. I cut myself off with a scream and leaped back. I couldn't see Alara's face anymore. Not just in the mirror, but anywhere. In her place was the other girl's face, glaring at me with pure hatred. I backed away, my eyes darting to the door. I cursed myself for positioning my chair further from the exit. Basic safety protocol, ignored in my complacency. And why did I choose to work on a day when my admin was on leave? Would anyone hear me if I screamed? You will not cure her, the girl hissed, her voice raspy and chilling, emanating from Alara's lips. She does not deserve to be cured. She deserves to hate herself, the way I hated myself. This was bad. A supernatural possession? A haunting? Or were Alara and I sharing a hallucination, a manifestation of some dissociative identity within her? I couldn't afford to lose my license, so I opted for the supernatural explanation, clinging to it like a life raft in a sea of uncertainty. Who are you? What is your relationship with Alara? The girl sneered. I'm no friend of hers. We have no relationship. How do you know her? Why do you stick to her? Silence. There must have been something. I forced myself to study her face, to look beyond the rage and see the hurt beneath. She seemed to be a teenager, no older than 14 or 15, her features contorted in a mask of anger and pain. "You don't seem to be a bad person, or unreasonable," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. I needed to find a way to connect, to appeal to her humanity, to the girl she must have been before whatever tragedy had transformed her into this vengeful spirit. The girl blinked, taken aback. "She deserves to hurt," she finally said, her voice thick with bitterness. "What did she do?" A long pause. Then her expression crumbled, replaced by a look of pure fear. Alara's features flickered through for a moment, her eyes wide with panic, her mouth opening and closing in a silent plea for help. "Help! I can't," Alara gasped, as if surfacing from a deep dive, fighting for air. Then she was gone, the other girl's face hardening once more. I waited, my heart pounding, my mind racing. "She was nice to me," the girl finally spat, her voice laced with venom. "Her friend was a bitch, nasty bitch, but at least she wasn't fake like sweet Lil Alara." "Whatever happened, it must have hurt you deeply," I said, my voice soft, trying to soothe the wounded spirit before me. The girl's anger seemed to dissipate slightly, replaced by a raw vulnerability. "Brenda was a bitch, mean to my face, called me names, chubby choom, fatass, lard face. She was disgusting." I frowned. The girl before me was curvier than my usual clientele, but that didn't make her any less beautiful. I imagined her hazel eyes, now filled with rage, must have once been warm and kind. And Alara? She always had a smile. She didn't remember who I was, but whenever she walked by, she would smile and nod. She even paid me a few compliments. The girl's eyes glistened, the anger momentarily forgotten. "But that was all fake," she spat, the venom in her voice making me flinch. Brenda was her friend. I never understood why, not until that day. The girl, I still didn't know her name, suddenly yanked at her hair, ripping out a fistful. It was Alara's hair she was pulling, and I heard a muffled scream from somewhere deep within. Brenda was pointing at me, making her usual shitty comments. "You sure you want that ice cream?" the girl mimicked in a cruel, high-pitched voice. "You could end up looking like her." She gestured towards herself, her face contorted in a mask of disgust. Brenda pointed right at me, like I wasn't even there, like I didn't have feelings, and Alara just laughed and smacked Brenda on the arm playfully. "Stop it," she said, still giggling. Her eyes blazed with fury, but beneath the rage I saw the raw wound of betrayal and humiliation. It was a pain I recognized, the sting of being ostracized, of being the outsider looking in. Alara went on, rubbed salt in the wound. She pinched her non-existent tummy, said she felt fat. Bitch. Teenage cruelty. It was a battlefield, a relentless struggle for acceptance and belonging, where words could be weapons and laughter could be a form of torture. I want her to feel how I felt, to feel fat, ugly, hated. I hope she feels this way forever, that she starves herself to death in a house with an extra-large refrigerator stuffed full of food. She doesn't deserve happiness. So you haunt her, not Brenda. As the words left my lips, the chilling realization struck me. This girl was haunting Alara. This girl was no longer alive. This girl might have. The thought was too terrible to contemplate. Tears pricked my eyes, a wave of sadness and compassion washing over me. Who says I didn't haunt Brenda? The girl smirked, a cruel twist of her lips. Ask Alara where Brenda's at. A shiver ran down my spine, an icy premonition of something terrible. Oh wait, she doesn't know. Brenda left school, moved away. She had to be hospitalized, you know. Ask me what happened to her. I bit my lip, fear and a strange sense of responsibility warring within me. This wasn't just about Alara anymore. It was about this girl, this lost soul trapped in her own pain and anger. I'm so sorry, I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. I had to focus on helping Alara. And this girl too. What's your name? A slight hesitation. Kayla. I'm so sorry, Kayla. All that shouldn't have happened to you. People can be so cruel, especially when they're young. Kayla's eyes moistened, though her face remained hardened. She looked down as if ashamed of her vulnerability. "You're a beautiful girl," I said, ignoring her derisive snort, "and I'm sorry you were made to think differently. That the world made you feel like you weren't enough when you so clearly are." Kayla clenched her fists. "Don't lie to me. Don't speak that bullshit." I broke my own rule and reached out to hug her, my arms encircling her thin frame. "I really am so sorry," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. She stood frozen for a moment, then her body convulsed with sobs, a torrent of grief and rage released after years of silent suffering. I held her, saying nothing, letting her tears wash away the pain and anger that had consumed her for so long. When I finally pulled back, Kayla hid her face with her hair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Did you know Alara was bullied?" I asked, breaking confidentiality, but this felt beyond the usual therapeutic boundaries. Kayla's expression told me she didn't know. All through the ages of 7 to 13. Badly bullied. She was overweight then, and her sister had already begun modeling. A teen model. When her sister showed up for her school events with her parents, how do you think people reacted? Shock and pain registered in Kayla's eyes, a flicker of understanding replacing the burning rage. She worked hard to lose weight. Her parents encouraged it, wanted her to be more like their older daughter, their pride and joy. I paused, letting the weight of Alara's past settle, the years of insecurity and self-doubt that had led her to this point. Brenda was the popular girl. The first popular girl who wanted to be her friend. Do you see why she might have had difficulty standing up to her, having been bullied in the past? Kayla opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. I know it still wasn't the right thing to do. She could have done better. But do you really not see how what she had gone through would have led her to her actions and words? Kayla closed her mouth and looked down, her anger subsiding, replaced by a dawning realization. Brenda herself might have been going through her own issues. I won't defend her. I didn't know her. But I know how tough society is on women, how difficult it is to keep trying to be perfect, to be everything the world tells you a woman should be. I placed my hand on Kayla's, my touch gentle, reassuring. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. Don't you deserve some compassion? To be at peace? To be happy? Doesn't Alara? Kayla's tears flowed freely once again, a release of years of pent-up emotions. My heart ached for her. I wanted to hug her again, to offer more comfort, to somehow mend the broken pieces of her soul. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. I wasn't prepared when Kayla lunged at me, her touch icy cold, her grip surprisingly strong. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest, a scream caught in my throat. Before I could react, she was inside me. It wasn't a possession in the traditional sense. It was more like a merging. I could feel her emotions, a swirling vortex of rage, sadness, and despair. Her memories flooded my mind, vivid and visceral. The relentless bullying, the casual cruelty of Brenda and her friends, the crushing weight of loneliness and isolation. I staggered to the mirror, my legs feeling like lead. Staring back at me was Kayla's face, her hazel eyes filled with a mixture of triumph and confusion. "Easy to say when you look the way you do," she said, her voice, my voice, raspy and unfamiliar. "How do you like it now? Having my face? My body?" I looked at myself, at Kayla in the mirror, and then something unexpected happened. I smiled. "I think I look beautiful," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, and I meant it. I saw the pain in her eyes, the vulnerability beneath the anger. I saw the girl she could have been, the girl she still was, buried beneath layers of hurt and resentment. Kayla stared at me, her mouth agape. It was as if I had slapped her. She had expected resistance, disgust, maybe even fear, but not acceptance, not compassion. I placed my hand on the mirror, my fingers tracing the outline of her face. "You're beautiful," I repeated, my voice soft but firm. From the corner of my eye, I saw Alara staring at us, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. Kayla stammered, her voice cracking. She looked away, her face contorted in a struggle I couldn't fully comprehend. Then, her eyes softened, the anger fading, replaced by a flicker of something akin to hope. She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. And then, she was gone. I took a deep breath, the tension draining from my body. I looked down at myself, relieved to find my own form intact. I turned to Alara, who was still staring at the mirror, her face pale and drawn. "Do you see her?" I asked gently. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No." I sank to the floor, my legs suddenly weak. Alara followed suit, collapsing beside me. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the gentle hum of the air conditioner. When Alara's parents finally arrived, we said nothing of what had transpired. I didn't bother confronting them about their absence. That was a battle for another time. I wish I could say that Alara recovered from her eating disorder that day, but that wasn't the case. However, something had shifted. A breakthrough had occurred, a crack in the wall of her self-loathing. She started to engage more in therapy, to open up about her fears and insecurities. She even began to eat a little more, her body slowly regaining its strength. It was a long and arduous journey, but Alara was finally on the road to recovery. And I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that Kayla was finally at peace. All's well that ends well, right? Well, almost. Except for the phone call I received a few weeks later. A frantic mother, her voice trembling with fear, asking for an urgent appointment for her teenage daughter. She wouldn't tell me what the issue was, only that she was terrified. Her daughter's name? Brenda.